Ethan, a 28-year-old graphic designer, had been crashing at his parents' house in a quiet suburban neighborhood for 6 months. After a messy breakup left him scrambling for stability, he'd taken refuge with Sophie and Mark, his mother and father. He wasn't freeloading. He worked a steady job, chipped in for groceries, paid the utilities, and even covered his teenage sister Mia's phone bill and Liam's streaming subscriptions. But on Thanksgiving, everything unraveled. The family had gathered around a turkey Sophie had overcooked, the air thick with tension. Mark, a gruff man who liked to flex his authority, brought up their upcoming dream vacation to Hawaii. "We've been planning this for months," he said, eyeing Ethan. "Everyone's pitching in." Sophie chimed in, her voice sharp. "You've been living here rent-free. The least you could do is pay your share, $2,000. Ethan blinked, stunned. He'd already spent hundreds supporting the household, and now they wanted him to bankroll a luxury trip he wasn't even invited on? "I can't afford that," he said, voice steady but firm. "I'm saving to move out." The argument escalated fast. Mark slammed his fist on the table, calling Ethan ungrateful. Sophie accused him of leeching off them. Liam, his 24-year-old brother, smirked from across the table, saying nothing. Mia looked uncomfortable but stayed silent. When Ethan refused to budge, Mark pointed at the door. "If you won't help, get out." Sophie nodded coldly. It was Thanksgiving, but Ethan grabbed his coat and left, the sound of their shouting fading as he stepped into the chilly night. He crashed at a friend's place, vowing to cut them off. For a month, he heard nothing until Sophie's name lit up his phone. Ethan had spent the past 4 weeks rebuilding. He'd found a small apartment downtown, furnished it with thrift store finds, and thrown himself into work. The sting of Thanksgiving lingered, but he was moving forward. Then, on a rainy December evening, his phone buzzed. It was Sophie. Her voice was shaky, a far cry from the venom she'd spat a month ago. "Ethan, we need you," she said. He almost hung up, but curiosity, or maybe masochism, kept him on the line. She explained. Liam, always reckless, had gotten into gambling. Online poker, sports bets, crypto casinos, he'd spiraled deep. He'd lost $25,000, money he didn't have, borrowed from shady lenders who were now threatening him. "They're going to hurt him," Sophie pleaded. "Mark and I can't cover it." "You're doing well, can't you help?" Ethan's jaw tightened. The audacity floored him. After kicking him out for not funding their vacation, they now wanted him to bail out Liam? He remembered Liam's smirk at Thanksgiving, his silence as their parents turned on him. Ethan wanted to say no. He wanted to scream. But Sophie's sobbing tugged at something deep, a vestige of loyalty he couldn't shake. "I'll think about it," he muttered, hanging up. That night, he paced his apartment, weighing his options. He had savings, $15,000, scraped together for his fresh start. Helping Liam would gut that. But if he didn't, what would happen? He pictured Liam, bruised and broken, and hated himself for caring. After hours of wrestling with it, he decided he'd send $12,000, half his savings, but that was it. He wired the money the next day, texting Sophie, "This is the last time." She replied with a flood of gratitude, promising repayment. Ethan didn't believe her. Weeks passed, and Ethan heard nothing about the money. He'd check his bank account daily, hoping for a miracle deposit, but it stayed stubbornly empty. Work kept him busy, designing logos for a startup, late nights sketching under dim lamplight, but the silence from his family gnawed at him. He texted Sophie once, a curt, "Any update on Liam paying me back?" She'd responded with vague assurances, "Soon, honey. We're sorting it out." Liam hadn't reached out at all. Ethan tried to focus on his new life. He'd made friends at a local coffee shop, started jogging along the riverfront, and even flirted with the idea of dating again. But the $12,000 loomed like a shadow. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. He'd sacrificed for them, again, and they'd left him hanging. One evening, sipping cheap wine on his couch, he called his friend Nate, who'd let him crash after Thanksgiving. "They're using me," Ethan vented. Nate, blunt as ever, agreed. "They've always taken you for granted, man. Cut them loose." The next day, Ethan drove to his old neighborhood to clear his head. He didn't stop at his parents' house, just cruised past, windows down, the winter air biting his face. The house looked the same, peeling paint, Sophie's wind chimes clanging. He wondered if Liam was inside, safe now because of his money, while he scraped by. Doubt crept in. Had he been naive to help? As he pulled back into his apartment lot, his phone buzzed, a neighbor from the building. "Hey, man, you home? Something's off with your place." Ethan's stomach dropped. He raced upstairs, dread building with every step. Ethan's apartment door was ajar when he reached it. His heart pounded as he pushed it open. The place was trashed, couch cushions slashed, drawers yanked out, his TV gone. His laptop, his work files, even the sentimental watch his grandfather had given him, all missing. Panic gave way to fury as he dialed the police. While waiting for them, he noticed something: muddy footprints leading to the kitchen. They were fresh, and one print had a distinctive zigzag sole he recognized: Liam's sneakers. The cops arrived, took his statement, and dusted for prints. Ethan told them about the money, the gambling, his family's desperation. "You think they did this?" an officer asked, eyebrow raised. Ethan nodded, voice tight. "Who else?" He gave them Liam's name, Sophie's, Mark's. The police promised to investigate, but Ethan wasn't hopeful. He spent the night cleaning, replaying every interaction with his family. How had it come to this? The next morning, a detective called. They tracked Liam's phone, stupidly left on to a pawn shop downtown. Security footage showed him selling Ethan's TV and laptop, Sophie and Mark waiting in the car outside. They'd been caught red-handed. Arrest warrants were issued. Burglary for Liam, accessory charges for his parents. Ethan sat on his bare floor, stunned. He'd helped them, and they'd robbed him. The betrayal cut deeper than the loss of his stuff. He wondered if they'd planned it all along, use his money, then take more when he wasn't looking. News of the arrest spread fast. Ethan's phone buzzed with texts from cousins, aunts, and family friends, some sympathetic, others fishing for gossip. He ignored them all, too raw to talk. The police recovered some of his belongings from the pawn shop, but the watch was gone, likely sold on the black market. Ethan filed an insurance claim, but the process was slow, and he felt exposed, violated. Then his grandmother, Ellen, called. She and Grandpa Paul lived an hour away, semi-retired and mostly out of the family drama. Ellen's voice was steady, but laced with anger. "We heard what happened, Ethan. From the police, not your mother. What they did to you," she trailed off, then said, "Come see us." Ethan drove up that weekend, needing their calm. Over coffee, Ellen and Paul laid it out. They were done with Sophie and Mark. "We raised her better," Paul grumbled. "And Liam's no better." They'd already cut financial ties, small loans and holiday gifts, and now they were cutting contact. Ethan unloaded everything: Thanksgiving, the gambling, the theft. Ellen hugged him, her grip fierce. "You're not their ATM," she said. Paul slipped him a check for $5,000, part of what they'd planned to give Sophie for Christmas. "Use it to recover," he said. Ethan tried to refuse, but they insisted. Driving home, he felt a shift. His grandparents' support was a lifeline, but it also sharpened his resolve. His parents and Liam weren't his burden anymore. Liam's trial came fast. He pleaded guilty to burglary, hoping for leniency, but the judge wasn't swayed: 6 months in jail, plus restitution. Sophie and Mark got probation and fines as accomplices, their lawyer arguing they were desperate to help their son. Ethan sat in the courtroom, watching their faces: Liam's sullen, Sophie's tear-streaked, Mark's defiant. They avoided his gaze. The restitution order was a hollow victory. Ethan knew they couldn't pay. They were broke, drowning in Liam's gambling debts. Afterward, Sophie cornered him outside. "How could you do this to us?" she sobbed. "We're family." Ethan stared at her, incredulous. "You stole from me," he said. "After I bailed you out." She had no answer, just more tears. Mark pulled her away, muttering about ungrateful kids. Ethan walked off, the weight of their guilt no longer his to carry. The legal system had spoken, but it didn't heal the wound. He drove home, replaying her words, wondering when family had become a weapon. Back at his apartment, he started rebuilding: new locks, a security camera, a cheap TV from a garage sale. Work picked up. A client loved his latest design, offering a bonus. Life inched forward, but the trust was gone. He screened calls, avoided old haunts where he might run into them. The courtroom had been a mirror, reflecting a truth he dodged too long: they'd never change. Ellen and Paul didn't stop at cutting ties. They called a family meeting, minus Sophie, Mark, and Liam, inviting Ethan, Mia, who'd moved in with a friend, and a few cousins. Over pot roast, they laid out their stance. "We're not enabling that behavior," Ellen said. "Ethan's been hurt enough." Mia, 17 and quiet, spoke up. "They've been fighting nonstop since Liam got arrested. Dad blames Mom, Mom blames Ethan." Ethan winced. Blamed for what? Saving them, then defending himself? The cousins nodded, sharing their own stories of Sophie's guilt trips and Mark's temper. Paul proposed a new family dynamic: support each other, not the chaos. They rallied around Ethan, offering furniture, meals, company. Mia hugged him, whispering, "I'm sorry I didn't say anything at Thanksgiving." He hugged her back, forgiving her silence. She was a kid caught in the crossfire. Ellen pulled Ethan aside later. "We're proud of you," she said. "You stood up." She handed him an old photo, him and Grandpa Paul fishing, years back. "This is family," she added. Ethan tucked it away, a talisman against the mess. Driving home, he felt lighter. His grandparents were rewriting the script, and he was part of it, not the villain, but the survivor. Months passed, and Ethan settled into a rhythm. Work thrived. He landed a contract with a tech firm, doubling his income. He furnished his apartment properly, new couch, a desk for his sketches, plants that didn't die. Friends noticed the change. "You're happier," Nate said over beers. Ethan shrugged. Less baggage. He blocked Sophie, Mark, and Liam on everything. Mia stayed in touch, texting about school, steering clear of their parents. One night, scrolling job listings out of habit, he stumbled on a posting in another city, Portland, a place he'd always wanted to explore. The pay was better, the vibe artsy and fresh. He applied, half expecting nothing, but got a call back within days. The interview was a breeze. They loved his portfolio. 2 weeks later, he had an offer. Ethan stared at it, the future tangling with the past. Leaving meant truly cutting ties, no chance run-ins, no guilt trips. He said yes. Packing was cathartic. He donated old clothes, sold furniture, kept the photo from Ellen. Portland loomed, a blank slate. He told Mia first. She cheered, promising to visit. Ellen and Paul sent a housewarming gift, a coffee maker, with a note. "New starts deserve good brew." Ethan smiled, taping the last box. The move wasn't running, it was choosing himself. A week before the move, Sophie called from a new number. Ethan almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Her voice was frail. "We're losing the house," she said. "Liam's debts. The bank's taking it." She paused. Then, "Can you help?" "For Mia's sake." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. Mia was fine, she told him so. This was manipulation, the old playbook. "No," he said, calm but final. "I'm done." Sophie begged, then lashed out. "You've turned everyone against us." Ethan cut her off. "You did that yourselves." He hung up, blocked the number, and sat in silence. The plea echoed, but it didn't sway him. He'd spent years as their fix-it guy, money, emotional labor, forgiveness. Not anymore. Portland wasn't just a move, it was a line in the sand. He told Ellen about it later. She sighed. "They'll never see it," she said. "But you do." Paul added, "Live your life, son." Ethan nodded, their words a balm. He loaded his car that weekend, glancing back at the apartment one last time. The road stretched ahead, and for once, it felt like his. Ethan arrived in Portland on a crisp March morning, the city buzzing with possibility. His new apartment overlooked a park, and his job started Monday. He unpacked slowly, savoring the quiet. The coffee maker hummed, a gift from Ellen and Paul grounding him. Mia texted a thumbs-up emoji. Nate promised a visit. The family he'd lost had been replaced by one he'd chosen. Work was a revelation, creative freedom, a team that valued him. He joined a running group, sketched at cafes, even adopted a scruffy cat named Jasper. The $12,000, the theft, the courtroom, they faded, scars not wounds. One evening, sipping coffee on his balcony, he got a letter from Mia. She'd turned 18, moved out, and was applying to colleges. "Thanks for showing me I can leave too," she wrote. Ethan smiled, proud. Sophie and Mark faded from his orbit. Rumors trickled through Mia, they downsized, still blaming him. Liam was out of jail, working odd jobs. Ethan didn't care. He wasn't their savior, their scapegoat, or their bank. He was Ethan, artist, friend, survivor. Thanksgiving felt like a lifetime ago. Portland wasn't just a place, it was proof he'd won. He'd built a life, not for them, but for himself.